Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching WION The World is One with me, Diksha Bisla. Let's start with the headlines. US President Donald Trump says the onus is now on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to build on the Alaska summit between the US leaders and the Russia's President Vladimir Putin and secure a deal to end the war. After the Alaska meeting, President Trump said he thinks there is no need for any tariffs on purchases of Russian oil for now. However, he said that it could change in 2 or 3 weeks.
That in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict.
Trump and Putin addressed joint press conference. Speaking first, Putin talks of shared heritage in Alaska and agreements reached on several issues for a peace deal with Ukraine. Now he says that all root causes must be eliminated and all of Russia's concerns must be taken into account. Putin says the war in Ukraine would not have started if Trump would have been the President of the United States in 2022. Claims that he tried convincing Biden to avoid making the situation escalate to a point in which serious consequences in the form of military action could occur.
We'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know.
Trump's remarks at the press conference end. Putin hints at the next meeting in Moscow. Reports say Hamas negotiators in Cairo have signaled a willingness to come down from demands that they made last month, but Israel has responded in the negative, saying it is not interested in another partial ceasefire. It is only willing to forego plans to take over Gaza City if Hamas agrees to all its demands. U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that he isn't running for president in 2028 in a social media post on Friday, pushing back on criticism from right-wing commentator Laura Loomer that he's disloyal to President Trump. Protesters clash with police in Serbia's capital as anti-government demonstrations rage. Several injured as the protests intensify. India Meteorological Department sounds orange alert for Mumbai as the city continues experiencing heavy rainfall, leading to waterlogging and reduced visibility in several areas. Residents advised to avoid non-essential travel and exercise caution while venturing out. The high-stakes Trump-Putin meeting concluded in Alaska with no significant breakthrough toward peace in Ukraine. Now, the meeting was followed by a joint press conference, but neither leader took questions from the media. Trump and Putin addressed the press, where the two leaders underlined the need to secure peace in Ukraine. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated Russia's red lines. Putin emphasized that the root causes of the conflict must be eliminated and all of Russia's concerns must be taken into account.
We're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we're prepared to work on that.
Now, Putin red flagged possible attempts by Europe and Ukraine to sabotage peace talks and added that he hoped there would be no backroom dealings or provocations by either to derail the talks.
I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress.
US President Donald Trump said that the meeting with Putin was highly productive and several points were agreed to by Putin, but a few are left out. He also said that he would call up NATO and Zelensky, and ultimately it's up to them to agree.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting.
The press conference came after nearly 3 hours of talks between the two sides. However, the meeting was not a one-on-one meet as was planned earlier. It was instead a 3-on-3 meeting with Trump joined by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, while Putin was joined by his aide Yuri Ushakov and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. With no summit deal reached with Putin over ending the war in Ukraine, WION spoke with analysts to weigh in on what they make of the Alaska summit, and this is what they had to say. Listen in.
Well, certainly the Ukrainians were sending a message to the Kremlin that nothing is out of bounds. They were able to hit these airfields, some of them more than 2,000 miles away, obviously with help from inside Russia. And many of the aircraft that were destroyed were strategic bombers that the Russians cannot replace. These are old bombers. Bear bombers are very old. The backfire bombers are from the 1970s. The Blackjacks are from the 1980s. We're talking about very old strategic bombers that cannot be replaced. Now, Kiev knew very well that there was going to be massive retaliation on the part of the Russians, and Mr. Putin pretty much told that to President Trump. But the one thing that holds the Russians back is that if they would respond with a nuclear response, that would trigger something that they don't know whether they could control, number one. Number two, depending on where the strike hits, there would be blowback inside Russia. And number three, Mr. Trump is known to react exceedingly strongly when he sees children killed. That's why he already called Putin crazy. We don't know, and Putin doesn't know, how Trump would respond to a nuclear attack. And so even though the Russians have been threatening this pretty much for 2 years, it hasn't happened. Kiev knew very well that they would be struck. That's not a surprise at all. But I think they took that into account.
I think that it was great that the meeting occurred. were a lot of people who tried to sabotage it, who were hoping and praying that it was going to be a failure. And clearly, the signal that it had been a failure would be Trump addressing the press by himself. Well, that didn't happen. So it was not a failure in that way. However, there were no details. They talked about agreeing on so many topics, and the only thing that we heard any agreement on was that if Trump had been president in 2022 instead of Biden, that it wouldn't have started in the first place. So they said they had agreements. They said it was friendly. They seemed friendly. They talked a little bit about potential economic deals. They didn't hardly spoke at all about a ceasefire or peace in the war. So, Trump is going to have his phone conversations now with the heads of NATO and the coalition of the willing and others. Maybe something will come out of that, but we did not get any substance whatsoever.
It's evident that they did not achieve a breakthrough, which was somewhat predictable. Prior to the meeting, we saw a lot of speculation, open sources indicating that President Zelensky is not going to agree on land swapping. There's a territorial integrity issue here where Putin still views Ukraine as his territory, especially eastern Ukraine. And at the same time, President Zelensky feels exactly the opposite. So going into the meeting, you saw there was a lack of consensus. And so everybody was betting on the power of the presidency, the American presidency, as far as achieving some sort of ceasefire. But evidently, there was very slow movement or no movement in terms of achieving the ceasefire. But what I saw beyond that is that I felt that the trade and investment potential deal was more of a priority than achieving the ceasefire. So Putin mentioned that I want to do more business with the United States, especially looking at trade and investment. And he even went more specific about what kind of domains he wants to invest in with the United States, which was cut off after 2023.
The Russian delegation has claimed that the high-stakes meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump was very productive. Now, this despite no major breakthrough being announced in Alaska. After the meeting, Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, stated that the presidents of Russia and the United States decided not to take questions because they made comprehensive remarks at the final press conference. Describing the conversation as a very positive step, he said that it indicated a constructive tone that could pave the way for exploring peace settlement options together. Reacting to the discussions held with the US side, Russia's defense minister Andrei Belousov said that the mood was great, while finance minister Antony Silvanov took a more cautious approach, saying, "You'll know everything later." Kirill Dmitriev, Putin's special envoy, highlighted that both parties discussed numerous issues, reaching agreements on several key points, while others remained under consideration. He expressed optimism about continuing to build US-Russia relations despite potential resistance and strengthening ties between the two countries.
US-Russia summit in Alaska has definitely been productive. US side has received Russian side very well. There were lots of issues that we discussed and many we agreed. Some of them are to be agreed. And definitely it's very important that President Trump outlined the significant economic potential of cooperation between US and Russia. And we'll continue building US-Russia relations going forward, despite lots of the resistance to this, but we'll continue strengthening US-Russia ties.
Russia's ambassador to the US, Alexander Dashev, expressed and he described the atmosphere during the talks as generally positive. He, however, noted that no major breakthroughs have been achieved yet, stressing that both sides are working towards it.
The atmosphere was generally positive, and we will hear the specific results firsthand. But there have been no major breakthroughs, and it seems unlikely that there will be any. But we are trying, especially in the visa area. However, you can see for yourselves that changes are happening very, very slowly. The atmosphere was generally positive, and we will hear the specific results firsthand. But there have been no major breakthroughs, and it seems unlikely that there will be any. But we are trying, especially in the visa area. However, you can see for yourselves that changes are happening very, very slowly.
And breaking news coming in after the Alaska meeting, US President Donald Trump said that talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin were productive, but both the presidents said that there was no deal yet. Referring to the meeting, Trump said that he thinks there is no need to impose tariffs on buyers of Russian oil for now. However, he said that he may have to impose tariffs in the next 2 to 3 weeks if there is no clear progress towards a Ukraine deal. Now, Trump said that he will not have to think of retaliatory tariffs on countries buying Russian oil right now, but may have to in 2 or 3 weeks. Referring to the retaliatory tariffs on countries buying Russian oil, Trump said, "Well, because of what happened today, I think I don't have to think about that now." He added that I may have to think about it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something, but we don't have to think about that right now. I think, the meeting went very well. Now, for India, that could be a temporary relief as Trump's 25% retaliatory tariffs were to kick in next week. For the viewers who are just joining us, this is the breaking news we're getting right now. After the Alaska meeting, US President Donald Trump has said that talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin were very productive, but both the presidents said that there was no deal just yet. Referring to the meeting, Trump said that he thinks there's no need to impose tariffs on buyers of Russian oil, at least for now. However, he said that he may have to impose tariffs in the next 2 to 3 weeks if there is no clear progress towards a Ukraine deal. Trump also said that he will not have to think of retaliatory tariffs on countries who are buying Russian oil right now, but he may have to in 2 to 3 weeks. Also referring to the retaliatory tariffs on countries who are buying Russian oil, Trump stated, "Well, because of what happened today, I think I don't have to think about that now." He also added that I may have to think about it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something, but we don't have to think about that right now. I think, the meeting went very well. Now, for India, that could be a temporary relief as Trump's 25% retaliatory tariffs were to kick in from next week. News of the past week reflected positioning for a peace deal on Ukraine at the Alaska meeting between US President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, while Trump said the talks with Putin were productive, both the sides and both the presidents have said that there is no deal yet. That could be a warning shot for risky assets heading into next week, as the move over the past week were first driven by different readings of the US inflation data and then on expectations of a Ukraine deal. Let's take a look at WION's global markets to see how different assets moved over the past week. Wall Street stocks and Bitcoin surged to record highs on bets of Federal Reserve easing, but towards the end of the week, nervousness around the Alaska meeting had markets moving sideways. Crude edged lower and gold fell sharply in anticipation of a deal. The dollar was subdued heading into the meeting, but going forward, the Fed cut is likely to weigh more on the currency. Beside the Trump-Putin bromance, the lack of clarity on what happens in the Ukraine talks points to reversal of some of the market moves next week. Now moving on to Asia-Pacific stock markets, China's main stock index led the gains in the region with a 9.2% surge. The US-China trade truce kept investors betting on Chinese stocks. Meanwhile, Trump extended the truce ahead of the Alaska meeting, even as he upped his tariff rhetoric on India for buying Russian oil. Still, India's benchmark indices ended with gains for the week. The Sensex closed out the week with nearly a 1% gain. Australia's stock index made prominent gains, while Japanese stocks rose 3.7%. Wall Street stocks have led a significant rally since April lows. That trend continued last week, albeit slowing towards the end of the week after benchmarks had surged to fresh record highs repeatedly. The Canadian and the Brazilian benchmarks too showed marginal gains despite Trump's tariff weighing on sentiment for those stocks. However, with Trump and Putin still to tell the world of any clear steps towards a peace agreement, the risk is of a reversal in the reaction next week. Then across the Atlantic, European stocks surged over the past week on hopes of a Ukraine peace deal. Benchmarks across the region closed the week in the green. French CAC led the gains, closing the week with a 2.3% gain. UK's FTSE and the German DAX ended with marginal gains. The South African stock index added 1.1%. Now let's turn our attention to the overall economic outlook. Let's take a look at the Asia-Pacific region. Trump's trade war worries have weighed on the outlook for global economies. In Asia, India is still expected to be the fastest growing major economy in the world. However, a standoff with US on tariff is likely to weigh on India's growth. The outlook for the rest of the Asia remains negative. For China, the outlook is still mired in doubts from the recession in its real estate crisis. However, the latest trade truce with the US are good signs for the economy, as reflecting in a rebound in manufacturing activity. The economic outlook for Japan and Aussie mirrored worries from Trump's trade war. In the Americas, the economic outlook for the US, Canada, Brazil and Argentina showed trade tariffs are likely to hurt economic growth. For the US economy, stagflation bets are still weighing on sentiment in the outlook. The biggest data revision since the pandemic for US jobs is now increasing bets for the Fed to cut rates in September. However, complicating the Fed's job, tariffs are starting to show up in inflation. US tariffs have surged to over 20% from about 2% before Trump took office in January. The economic activity expectations for Canada, Brazil and Argentina were also cut. On the other side of the Atlantic, the negative outlook seems to be more widespread. The expectation shows the clouds are darkening again for the UK and other European economies. The trade deals agreed with the US point towards more pain, and those worries continue to cloud the outlook for the region. Now, the story wasn't very different for the African economies, where the outlook remains negative. A new documentary giving a rare look into the life of Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, is set to release next month, and here's all that you need to know about it. Well, titled In Whose Name, the documentary revolves around the many aspects of Ye's life. It's held by Nico Ballesteros, who shot 3,000 hours of never-before-seen footage over the last 6 years of the rapper's life. The documentary sheds light on the ups and downs in Ye's controversy-ridden life. This includes his battle against bipolar disorder, complicated marriage with TV personality Kim Kardashian, and losing out on sponsorship deals. In a statement, producer Simran Singh revealed that the director was living alongside Ye. With a camera in his hand, he didn't know what he was capturing or where it would lead. And that's what makes it the raw footage. Now, the documentary will release in approximately 1,000 screens across the United States on September 19th. For those unaware, Ye has been embroiled in several controversies in the recent months, and most recently, he landed in trouble for his anti-Semitic and pro-Nazi remarks, due to which several brands, including Adidas, severed ties with him. And with that, it's time for us to slip into a very short break. But don't go anywhere. More news and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching WION World is One. Stay tuned.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions.